After her fiancé traded her for an investor, she married the uncle, unaware he's a Korean mafia CEO. The boardroom door slammed open with such force that the hinges rattled. Hannah stood frozen in the hallway, her heart hammering against her ribcage as she watched her fiancé, Jason, press his lips against another woman's mouth. Not just any woman, but the wealthy investor he'd been courting for months. The woman's diamond-encrusted fingers tangled his hair, while Jason's hands gripped her waist with a familiarity that made Hannah's stomach turn. "I told you," Jason murmured against the investor's lips, his voice carrying clearly into the hallway. "Hannah was just a stepping stone. You're my real future." The investor laughed, a cold, calculating sound. "Good. I don't share my investments or my men." Hannah's engagement ring suddenly felt like a shackle burning her finger. 3 years. 3 years of her life. And she was nothing more than a business strategy. Before we begin, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We would love to hear from you. But here's where the story gets crazy, because what Hannah didn't know was that Jason's quiet, mysterious uncle who'd always been kind to her at family gatherings wasn't just a wealthy businessman. Kim Woo-bin was the hidden CEO of Korea's most powerful mafia syndicate, and he'd been watching Hannah for longer than anyone realized. When she married him 6 months later to escape the pain of Jason's betrayal, she thought she was choosing safety and comfort. She had no idea she was walking straight into a world of dangerous secrets, deadly rivals, and a love so intense it would change everything she thought she knew about herself. And trust me, you're going to want to stick around for this wild ride, because what happens next will blow your mind. If you're watching this, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. This story is just beginning, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. The choices we make in a single moment can change everything, can cost us everything. Stay with us to see how far one woman will go to find love. 6 months earlier, Hannah had been living her best life in Seoul, Korea. After graduating with honors from Fiancé University with a degree in international business, she landed her dream job at a prestigious Korean tech company in Gangnam. The transition from her hometown in Atlanta to the bustling streets of Seoul had been challenging, but Hannah thrived on challenges. Her dark skin stood out in the predominantly Korean workforce, but she'd learned to navigate the curious stares and occasional microaggressions with grace and a killer work ethic that earned her respect. That's where she'd met Jason at a corporate networking event in the luxurious Latte Hotel. He'd approached her with a confidence that bordered on arrogance, his designer suit perfectly tailored, his smile practiced but charming. "You must be Hannah," he'd said in perfect English with just a hint of a Korean accent that he seemed to exaggerate for effect. "I've heard about the brilliant American consultant who's been revolutionizing the marketing department." Hannah had been flattered, naturally. Jason was handsome in that polished, magazine cover way, sharp jawline, expertly styled hair, and eyes that seemed to promise adventure. He worked in venture capital, he told her, connecting international investors with promising Korean startups. Within 3 months, they were dating. Within 6 months, he proposed at the top of Seoul Tower with the entire city glittering below them like a constellation of promises. "You're everything I've been looking for," Jason had whispered as he slipped the ring on her finger, a modest but elegant diamond that he claimed represented their humble beginnings. "Together, we're going to build an empire." Hannah's friends had been thrilled, throwing her a bachelorette party at a trendy Hongdae club where they danced until dawn. Her mother had cried happy tears over a video call from Atlanta, already planning to fly to Seoul for the wedding. Everything seemed perfect, like a K-drama romance come to life. But perfection, Hannah would learn, was often just a well-maintained illusion. The cracks started showing about 2 months before the wedding. Jason became increasingly obsessed with a potential investor named Victoria Chun, a Chinese-American billionaire who'd made her fortune in cryptocurrency and was looking to expand into the Korean market. Every conversation eventually circled back to Victoria, what she liked, what she needed, how important this deal was for his career. "Babe, I need you to come to dinner with Victoria tomorrow night," Jason said one evening as Hannah was reviewing wedding venue options on her laptop. He didn't look up from his phone, his thumbs flying across the screen. "Wear that red dress, the one that shows your shoulders. She likes bold fashion choices." Hannah glanced up, frowning. "Tomorrow?" "Jason, That's when we're supposed to meet with the caterer for our final tasting. Reschedule it." His tone was dismissive, as if rearranging their wedding plans was as simple as postponing a dentist appointment. "This meeting is crucial. Victoria is considering investing $20 million into my new fund." $20 million, Hannah. Do you know what that could mean for us? I know it's important, but the wedding will still happen. Jason interrupted, finally looking at her with barely concealed impatience. "But Victoria's investment window won't stay open forever. We need to prioritize." Hannah had swallowed her disappointment and worn the red dress. She'd smiled and nodded through a 3-hour dinner at a Michelin-starred restaurant in Gangnam, while Jason and Victoria discussed market trends and investment strategies. Victoria had barely acknowledged Hannah's presence, except to make a backhanded compliment about how exotic she must seem in Korea, as if Hannah were some kind of fascinating specimen rather than a professional woman with her own accomplishments. The next month brought more cancellations, more last-minute changes to accommodate Victoria's schedule. Jason missed Hannah's birthday dinner because Victoria needed him to review contracts. He postponed their appointment to register their marriage at the district office because Victoria was flying in from Hong Kong and wanted a tour of potential office spaces. Each time, he promised to make it up to her. Each time, Hannah found herself wondering when she'd become secondary in her own relationship. Her best friend Mina, a Korean woman she'd met during her first week in Seoul, had been less diplomatic in her observations. "Girl, I'm trying not to interfere in your relationship," Mina said over coffee at their favorite cafe in Insadong. "But Jason is treating you like an accessory, not a partner. When was the last time he asked about your day, your work, your feelings?" Hannah had stirred her latte absently, watching the foam swirl into patterns that dissolved as quickly as they formed. "He's under a lot of pressure. This investment could change his entire career trajectory." "And what about your career trajectory? What about your happiness?" Mina leaned forward, her expression serious. "Hannah, you're brilliant and beautiful, and you deserve someone who treats you like you're the most important investment of his life, not someone who's constantly putting you on hold for business deals." "I know," Hannah had whispered, but even then, she hadn't known. Not really. She'd still believed that Jason loved her, that this was just a temporary phase, that once the Victoria deal was finalized, things would go back to normal. If you're enjoying this story so far, go ahead and hit that like button because trust me, it gets so much crazier from here. The real wake-up call came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in late October. Hannah had left work early, feeling miserable with what she thought was the beginning of a cold. She planned to pick up some ginseng tea from the traditional market and then head to Jason's apartment to rest, maybe surprise him with his favorite bibimbap from the restaurant near his building. They'd barely seen each other in the past 2 weeks, communicating mostly through text messages that were more transactional than romantic. She'd used her key to let herself into his luxury apartment in the Cheongdam-dong district, calling out his name as she kicked off her heels in the entryway. No response. The apartment seemed empty, silent except for the rain pattering against the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the Han River. Hannah had wandered through the living room, noticing Jason's laptop open on the coffee table, papers scattered across the surface. She shouldn't have looked. She knew she shouldn't have looked. But one document caught her eye, a contract with Victoria Chin's company letterhead, and there, highlighted in yellow, was a clause that made Hannah's blood run cold. In exchange for a guaranteed investment of $25 million, Jason Park agrees to terminate his current romantic relationship and enter into an exclusive partnership with Victoria Chun, combining business and personal interests to ensure complete alignment of goals and loyalty. Hannah's hands trembled as she picked up the document, reading it again and again, hoping she'd misunderstood. But the words didn't change. There were more pages, detailing financial arrangements, property transfers, and timeline expectations. Jason was supposed to end their engagement by November 15th, 3 weeks away, and begin publicly dating Victoria by December 1st. The apartment suddenly felt too small, the air too thick. Hannah's vision blurred with tears as she stumbled backward, colliding with the hallway wall. Her mind raced through every interaction over the past few months, recontextualizing Jason's behavior through this horrible new lens. The canceled plans, the constant prioritization of Victoria, the way he'd been photographed with Victoria at several business events, but had asked Hannah to skip them because they'd be boring for her. She'd been so stupid, so incredibly, painfully stupid. Hannah was still standing there, clutching the contract, when she heard voices approaching from the hallway outside the apartment. Jason's voice, laughing at something. And then another voice, Victoria's, sultry and amused. Hannah's fight-or-flight instinct kicked in, but before she could move, the door opened. Jason walked in with Victoria wrapped around his arm like an expensive accessory. Both of them wet from the rain. Both of them smiling until they saw Hannah standing in the middle of the living room with a contract in her hands. The silence stretched out, thick and suffocating. Victoria's eyes flicked from Hannah to the papers and back again, her expression shifting from surprise to calculation in a heartbeat. Jason's face went pale, then flushed red. "Hannah," he started, his voice strangled. "What are you doing here?" The question was so absurd, so insulting, that Hannah almost laughed. What was she doing here? In her fiancé's apartment, where she had every right to be? "What am I doing here?" Hannah repeated, her voice eerily calm despite the storm raging inside her. "I think the better question is, what is this?" She held up the contract, her hand remarkably steady. "Care to explain why you're selling our relationship for $25 million? Victoria's lips curved into a smirk that made Hannah want to throw something. "Oh, honey," the investor purred, sliding her hand from Jason's arm and sauntering deeper into the apartment as if she owned it. "Surely you didn't think this was real? Men like Jason don't end up with women like you. They date you for the diversity points, the interesting Instagram posts, but when it's time for serious business, they need someone on their level." The casual cruelty of the words hit Hannah like a physical blow, but it was Jason's reaction, or lack thereof, that truly shattered her. He didn't defend her, didn't protest Victoria's vicious characterization. He just stood there, looking trapped and uncomfortable like a child caught with his hand in the cookie jar. "Jason." Hannah's voice cracked on his name. "Say something. Tell me this isn't what it looks like. Tell me you weren't planning to trade me in like a used car for an investment deal." He opened his mouth, closed it, ran a hand through his wet hair. "It's complicated, Hannah." "Complicated?" The word exploded from her lips. "Complicated? You proposed to me. You told me you loved me. You let me plan a wedding, let my mother buy our plane tickets. Let me believe we had a future together. And the whole time you were negotiating a deal to replace me." "You don't understand the business world," Jason said, his tone shifting to something defensive and condescending. "This investment isn't just about money. It's about connections, opportunities, building something that matters. Victoria and I, we're aligned in ways that you and I never could be." Each word was a knife, but Hannah refused to let them see her bleed. She carefully set the contract back on the coffee table, her movements deliberate and controlled. "You're right," she said quietly. "I don't understand how someone could be so morally bankrupt that they treat another human being like a business transaction. I don't understand how I ever thought I loved someone capable of this level of betrayal." She walked to where her purse sat on the hallway table, pulled off her engagement ring, the ring that had once symbolized promises and future in love, and set it down with a soft clink against the marble surface. "Consider yourself free to pursue your aligned opportunities," Hannah said, meeting Jason's eyes with a coldness she didn't know she possessed. "I hope $25 million keeps you warm at night, because that's all you're going to have. Victoria can have you. Congratulations, you both deserve each other." Victoria actually had the audacity to laugh, a sound like breaking glass. "At least you're taking this gracefully. I was worried we'd have a scene." Hannah turned to face her, and something in her expression made Victoria's smile falter. "Oh, sweetheart," Hannah said with deadly sweetness. "The scene hasn't even started yet. But don't worry, you won't be around to see it. I have a feeling Karma's going to handle this one all on her own." She walked out of that apartment with her head high, her shoulders back, refusing to let them see how thoroughly they'd destroyed her. It wasn't until she was in the elevator, descending from the 30th floor back to ground level, that the tears came. They poured down her face in hot, angry streams as the elevator dropped, as if she were falling through the wreckage of her old life into something unknown and terrifying. Hannah spent that night at Mina's apartment in Mapo Gu, alternating between crying, raging and staring blankly at the ceiling while her friend plied her with soju and increasingly creative threats against Jason's manhood. "I know a guy who knows a guy," Mina kept saying, waving her shot glass dramatically. One phone call, and Jason's precious assets become significantly less impressive. Just say the word. Despite everything, Hannah found herself laughing through her tears. "As tempting as that sounds, I think I'll pass on becoming an accessory to assault." "Your loss," Mina muttered, pouring another round. "But seriously, Hannah, you dodged a bullet. Jason is trash-wrapped in a designer suit. You deserve so much better than some wannabe venture capitalist who thinks women are interchangeable based on their networking value." Hannah knew Mina was right, but knowing it didn't make the pain any less real. She'd invested 3 years of her life into Jason, had rearranged her dreams to accommodate his ambitions, had defended him to her mother when she'd expressed concerns about how quickly they were moving. The betrayal wasn't just about losing him. It was about realizing she'd been performing in a play where everyone knew the ending except her. The next few weeks were a blur of humiliation and logistics. Hannah had to call her mother and explain why the wedding was canceled, a conversation that left them both in tears. She had to inform her co-workers, enduring their pitying looks and whispered gossip. Worst of all, she had to attend a company reception where Jason and Victoria made their first public appearance as a couple, looking disgustingly happy while photographers snapped pictures for the business section of the Korea Herald. Hannah had seriously considered skipping the event, but Mina had talked her into going. "You're going to walk in there looking absolutely stunning," her friend had insisted while helping her into a form-fitting emerald dress that made her skin glow. "You're going to smile, network like the boss you are, and remind everyone why you're the most impressive person in any room. Jason and his sugar mama can choke on their champagne." So Hannah went, armed with her best dress, her highest heels, and a determination not to let Jason see how much he'd broken her. She mingled, she laughed at appropriate moments. She discussed market trends with executives who seemed genuinely interested in her insights. She was doing fine, actually managing to enjoy herself, until she accidentally made eye contact with Jason across the room. He was staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Regret? Maybe, or resentment that she wasn't falling apart publicly. Victoria noticed and immediately pulled him closer, making a show of whispering something in his ear that made him laugh. It was so transparently territorial that Hannah almost rolled her eyes. That's when she felt a presence beside her, solid and calm. A low voice spoke near her ear, accented but smooth as aged whiskey. "If you grip that champagne flute any tighter, you're going to shatter it and make a scene. Although watching you throw champagne in my nephew's face would be entertaining." Hannah turned to find herself looking up at Kim Woo-bin, Jason's uncle, a man she'd met exactly 3 times at family gatherings and who'd always seemed slightly out of place at those events. He was older than Jason by at least 15 years, probably in his mid-40s, with silver threading through his black hair and lines around his eyes that suggested either frequent smiling or squinting at things far away. He wore a black suit that was somehow both understated and obviously expensive, and he carried himself with a quiet authority that made people unconsciously step aside when he moved through the crowd. "Mr. Kim," Hannah said, quickly loosening her death grip on her glass. "I didn't realize you'd be here. I don't usually attend these things," he admitted, taking a sip from his own drink. "Whiskey neat," she noticed. "But I had business in Seoul and thought I should make an appearance. My sister likes to complain when I skip too many family obligations." He paused, his dark eyes studying her face with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable, but somehow wasn't. "I heard about what happened. I'm sorry." Hannah's carefully constructed composure wavered. All evening, people had either avoided mentioning the breakup entirely or offered shallow condolences that felt more like social obligation than genuine sympathy. But something in Woo-bin's voice made it clear he actually meant it, and that sincerity threatened to crack the armor she'd built around her emotions. "Thank you," she managed, taking a large gulp of champagne to buy herself time to regain control. "I'm sure Jason has his version of events. I'm sure he does." Woo-bin's tone was dry, desert sand dry. "My nephew has always been exceptionally talented at justifying his choices through creative narrative. It's a useful skill in venture capital, less so in maintaining human relationships. Despite herself, Hannah laughed, a short, startled sound that drew a few curious glances from nearby attendees. That's a diplomatic way of saying he's a lying, opportunistic snake. I was trying to be polite, Wu Bin said, but there was a hint of amusement in his eyes. But yes, that's essentially the assessment. For what it's worth, I told him he was making a catastrophic mistake. He didn't appreciate my input. Before Hannah could respond, Jason himself appeared, Victoria draped on his arm like a mink stole. Uncle, he said with forced cheerfulness, I didn't know you were coming to Seoul. You should have told me. I would have arranged dinner. I'm sure you would have, Wu Bin replied, his voice perfectly pleasant and somehow cutting at the same time. Though your schedule seems quite full these days. New investments, new relationships, new priorities. The temperature around their small group seemed to drop several degrees. Victoria's smile became more fixed, less genuine. Jason's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Yes, well, life moves forward. Speaking of which, Victoria and I should make our rounds. Lots of important people to talk to. He didn't even glance at Hannah as he said it, as if she were furniture, part of the background. But Wu Bin looked at her, held her gaze for a long moment, then turned back to his nephew. Indeed, don't let us keep you from your important people. The emphasis on the last two words was subtle but unmistakable. After they left, Hannah let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Does it make me a terrible person that I enjoyed watching him squirm? It makes you human, Wu Bin said. And for the record, you handled that with considerably more grace than I would have. I was seriously considering accidentally spilling my drink on Victoria's dress. That white silk looked expensive. Hannah found herself genuinely smiling for the first time in weeks. You're not what I expected. No? What did you expect? I don't know. Jason always talked about you like you were this distant, serious businessman who disappeared for months at a time and barely participated in family events. Cold, I think was the word he used. Wu Bin's expression shifted into something that might have been amusement or might have been something darker. Cold is one interpretation. Selective about where I invest my time and energy is another. Family gatherings where people compete to brag about their accomplishments while secretly resenting each other's success have never appealed to me. Then why are you here? He was quiet for a moment, studying his whiskey as if it contained answers to questions he hadn't asked. Let's just say I had a feeling I should be, and I'm glad I was. You shouldn't have to face my nephew's poor choices alone. They talked for another hour, long after most of the other guests had left. Wu Bin was surprisingly easy to talk to, asking thoughtful questions about her work, her experience living in Korea, her plans for the future. He didn't offer empty platitudes about how she'd be better off or how Jason wasn't worth her tears. Instead, he listened, really listened, in a way that made Hannah feel like her words actually mattered. Subscribe and stay with me. The choices made next will change every life in this story. When the event finally ended, he walked her to her car, a gentleman's gesture that felt old-fashioned but sweet. Thank you, Hannah said as she unlocked her door. For tonight. For making it bearable. It was my pleasure, Wu Bin said. And again, she had the sense that he genuinely meant it. He pulled out a business card. Heavy stock, minimalist design, just a name and phone number. I'm in Seoul for the next few weeks handling some business matters. If you need anything, or if you just want to have coffee with someone who won't try to network with you or pity you, call me. Hannah took the card, running her thumb over the embossed characters of his name. Why are you being so kind to me? We barely know each other. Maybe that's exactly why, he said. No expectations, no history, no obligations. Sometimes strangers make the best confidants. He smiled, a subtle expression that somehow transformed his entire face. Besides, anyone who can resist the urge to assault my nephew with a champagne flute deserves support. The restraint alone is admirable. Over the next month, Hannah found herself texting Wu Bin more often than she'd anticipated. It started innocuously enough. Thank you messages, updates about how she was doing, recommendations for restaurants he should try while in Seoul. But gradually, their conversations deepened. They met for coffee in quiet cafes in Bukshin, walked through the gardens at Changdeokgung Palace, shared meals at hole-in-the-wall restaurants that tourists never found. Wu Bin was different from anyone Hannah had ever known. He was intensely private, revealing personal information in small, carefully measured doses, but when he did share, it was meaningful. He'd grown up in Busan. He told her, the youngest son in a family that had expectations he'd never quite met in conventional ways. He'd built his business. He was vague about the details, something about import-export and international trade, through a combination of strategic thinking and, he said with a wry smile, an ability to make difficult decisions that others avoided. You're like a puzzle, Hannah said one afternoon as they sat on a bench overlooking the Han River, watching boats glide past. Every time I think I'm starting to figure you out, you reveal another piece that doesn't quite fit with the rest. Is that frustrating? He asked. Surprisingly, no. It's actually kind of refreshing. After Jason, who performed transparency while hiding everything that mattered, your genuine mystery feels more honest somehow. Wu Bin turned to look at her, and there was something in his expression that made Hannah's heart skip. You're extraordinary. You know that? The way you've handled everything, rebuilt yourself, refused to let Jason's betrayal define you. It's remarkable. I don't feel remarkable, Hannah admitted. Most days I feel like I'm held together with duct tape and spite. Some of the strongest structures in the world are held together with unconventional materials, Wu Bin said. And spite is vastly underrated as a motivational force. They both laughed, and Hannah realized with a start that she was happy. Not the performative happiness she'd forced during her relationship with Jason, but genuine, complicated, messy happiness that acknowledged pain while still finding joy. And more disturbingly, she realized that a significant portion of that happiness involved the man sitting next to her. If you're wondering where this is going, trust me, you need to keep watching because the next part is absolutely insane. Don't forget to drop a comment and let me know what you think of Hannah's journey so far. The shift from friendship to something more happened gradually than all at once. Hannah couldn't pinpoint an exact moment when Wu Bin stopped being Jason's uncle or a kind stranger and became something that made her pulse quicken when her phone buzzed with his messages. Maybe it was the way he remembered small details she'd mentioned in passing. Her favorite type of tea, the artist whose work she'd admired at a gallery, the specific type of tegbaki she preferred. Maybe it was how he looked at her, like she was a mystery worth solving rather than a problem to be managed. Or maybe it was the night he'd shown up at her apartment at 2 a.m. because she'd sent him a message saying she couldn't sleep, that the memories of Jason's betrayal were haunting her again. He'd arrived with takeout containers of jjajangmyeon from her favorite restaurant. How he convinced them to make a delivery at that hour, she didn't ask, and they'd sat on her living room floor eating noodles and watching terrible Korean variety shows until dawn began to paint the sky pink. You know what the worst part is? Hannah had said, her voice thick with exhaustion and emotion. It's not even that he chose money over me. It's that I ignored every red flag, every warning sign, because I wanted so badly to believe in the fairy tale. I made myself smaller, quieter, more convenient, and it still wasn't enough. Wu Bin had set down his chopsticks, turning to face her fully. Then you were performing for the wrong audience, he said quietly. The right person doesn't need you to be smaller. They want all of you. The sharp edges, the complications, the moments when you're gloriously inconvenient. Anything less is just two people play acting at a relationship. And you know this from experience? Hannah had asked. His smile had been sad, knowing. I know it from watching people settle for less than they deserve for so long that they forget what they actually want. I know it from being guilty of the same thing myself, in different ways. That vulnerability, that glimpse beneath the carefully controlled surface, had shifted something fundamental between them. Hannah had found herself leaning closer, close enough to see flecks of amber in his dark eyes, close enough to notice the slight hitch in his breathing. The air between them had felt charged, electric, full of possibility and danger in equal measure. Wu Bin, she'd whispered, and he'd closed his eyes briefly, as if her saying his name caused him physical pain. I should go, he'd said, pulling back, creating distance. It's late, and you need sleep. Stay, Hannah had said, surprising herself with her boldness. Just not like that. Just stay, so I'm not alone. And he had. He'd stayed on her couch while she curled up at her bed, and knowing he was there, a protective presence in her space, had allowed her to finally sleep peacefully for the first time in weeks. After that night, things intensified. The casual touches became more frequent, more deliberate. His hand on the small of her back as they navigated crowded markets, his fingers brushing hers when he handed her coffee, the way he'd tuck a strand of hair behind her ear when the wind blew it across her face. Each touch felt significant, weighted with meaning neither of them was quite ready to acknowledge out loud. Mina, of course, noticed immediately. "Okay, who is he?" she demanded one evening when Hannah showed up to their weekly dinner date with a smile she couldn't quite suppress. "Who's who?" Hannah asked, failing spectacularly at innocence. "The person who's making you glow like you've discovered sunshine after living in a cave for 3 years. And don't say it's just being free from Jason, because I've seen you post-breakup and this is different. This is new person energy." Hannah had debated lying, but Mina had a supernatural ability to detect dishonesty. "It's Jason's uncle," she admitted, then quickly added, "but it's not like that. We're just friends. He's been incredibly supportive and—" "Jason's uncle?" Mina's eyes went wide. Kim Yubin, the mysterious one who no one knows anything about except that he's rich and travels constantly and looks like he could break someone in half without breaking a sweat. That's an oddly specific description, but yes, him. How do you know what he looks like? Hannah, I'm making my business to investigate anyone in your orbit who might be problematic. After the Jason disaster, I did a deep dive on his entire family tree. Wubin is interesting. Very little online presence, no social media. His business dealings are vague at best, but he shows up in photos from high-level business conferences and political events. And Mina leaned in conspiratorially. He's gorgeous in that dangerous, mysterious way that usually means terrible life choices, but excellent stories. "We're just friends," Hannah repeated, but even she could hear the lack of conviction in her voice. "Honey, no man shows up at a woman's apartment at 2 a.m. with her favorite food because they're just friends. That's courtship behavior. Old school, romantic, sweep you off your feet courtship behavior. Me not getting it. I approve, by the way. Jason deserves to have his uncle steal his ex. That's the kind of petty revenge I can get behind. It's not about revenge," Hannah protested. "I genuinely care about Wubin. He's kind and thoughtful, and he actually listens when I talk, and you're falling for him," Mina finished. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" That question haunted Hannah for the next week. What was she going to do about it? Wubin was 15 years older than her, Jason's uncle, and wrapped in so many layers of mystery that sometimes talking to him felt like negotiating with a particularly enigmatic sphinx. But he was also the first person in years who made her feel seen, valued, like she mattered beyond what she could provide or how she made someone else look. The decision was ultimately made for her on a rainy evening in late December. Wubin had invited her to dinner at his apartment, a penthouse in Hanamdong that made Jason's place look like a college dorm room. The space was all clean lines and muted colors, expensive art on the walls, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Seoul's glittering skyline. It was beautiful but impersonal, like a very upscale hotel room rather than a home. "You don't really live here, do you?" Hannah asked, running her hand along the back of a leather couch that probably cost more than her annual salary. "Define live," Wubin said from the open kitchen, where he was doing something complicated with ingredients Hannah couldn't see. "I own it. I sleep here when I'm in Seoul. But no, I suppose I don't live here in the way you mean. Where do you live, then? Really live?" He was quiet for a moment, the only sound the rhythmic chopping of a knife against cutting board. "I'm not sure I have a good answer to that question. I've moved around so much for so long that home became more of a concept than a location." There was something melancholy in his voice that made Hannah's chest tighten. She walked into the kitchen, leaning against the counter to watch him work. He'd rolled up his sleeves, and she found herself momentarily distracted by his forearms, which was ridiculous, getting flustered over someone's forearms. But there it was. "That sounds lonely," she said softly. "It is," he admitted, meeting her eyes. Or it was. Recently, that's been changing. The air between them felt thick, charged with everything they'd been carefully not saying for weeks. Hannah's heart was pounding so loudly she was sure he could hear it. "Wubin, I need to tell you something," he interrupted, setting down the knife and turning to face her fully. "I've been trying to figure out how to say this, and there's no version that doesn't sound either presumptuous or cowardly, so I'm just going to be direct." He took a breath. "I have feelings for you, Hannah. Real, complicated feelings that are probably inappropriate given our history and the situation, but they're there regardless. And I need to know if there's any possibility that you might feel the same way, Because if not, I need to create some distance before I make this worse. Hannah stared at him, her mind racing. This was it. The moment where she could play it safe, protect herself from potential hurt, maintain the careful boundaries she'd constructed around her heart. Or she could be brave. She could choose what she wanted instead of what was sensible. I'm terrified, she said finally. After Jason, I swore I wouldn't let myself be vulnerable again. I swore I'd be smarter, more careful, that I'd protect myself better. She took a step closer to him. But then you happened. You with your impossible patience and your random acts of kindness and your way of seeing me. Really seeing me. Like I'm something precious instead of convenient. And I realized that being safe and being alone aren't the same thing as being happy. Hannah, her name on his lips, sounded like a prayer and a question. I'm falling for you, she said, the words tumbling out in a rush now that she'd started. Maybe I already fell. And it's terrifying and complicated and probably a disaster waiting to happen, but I don't care. I want this. I want you. Woo Bin closed the distance between them in 2 strides, his hands coming up to frame her face with a gentleness that made her want to cry. Are you sure? He asked, his forehead resting against hers. Because once we do this, once we cross this line, there's no going back to what we were before. I don't want to go back, Hannah whispered. I want to go forward. Stay with me through the end of this journey. And if this story speaks to you, subscribe so you never miss the next one. He kissed her then, soft and slow and devastating, like he was trying to memorize the shape of her mouth, the taste of her breath. Hannah's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and the kiss deepened, became something urgent and desperate and real. She felt like she was falling and flying simultaneously, terrified and exhilarated, finally letting herself want something without apologizing for it. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Woo Bin rested his forehead against hers again. I'm going to make so many mistakes, he said quietly. I'm going to be overprotective and secretive and sometimes impossible to deal with. My life is complicated in ways I can't fully explain yet. But I swear to you, Hannah, I will never take you for granted. I will never make you smaller to make myself bigger. And I will never, ever trade you for anything. That's all I need, Hannah said, and kissed him again. And if you're sitting there thinking this is too good to be true, you're absolutely right, because we're about to get into the really wild part of this story. Make sure you stick around. The next 3 months were the happiest of Hannah's life. She and Woo Bin fell into a relationship that felt both brand new and comfortingly familiar, like coming home to a place you'd never been before. They were discreet at first. Woo Bin was adamant about keeping their relationship private until Hannah was ready to deal with the inevitable gossip and Jason's reaction. But within the privacy of their own space, they were completely themselves. Woo Bin was attentive in ways that still surprised her. He remembered everything she told him, followed through on every promise, showed up when he said he would. He introduced her to parts of Korean culture she'd never experienced. Traditional tea ceremonies in ancient temples, secret restaurants in unmarked buildings, art galleries that only opened for private viewings. He taught her Korean phrases that went beyond her basic business vocabulary, laughing at her pronunciation while gently correcting her tones. In return, Hannah introduced him to what she called normal person activities, street food from Pojamika, Noribang sessions where they butchered K-pop songs, lazy Sunday mornings spent doing absolutely nothing productive. She made him watch American movies he'd never seen, taught him card games her grandmother had taught her, forced him to try cooking disasters that somehow still ended up tasting decent. You're domesticating me, Woo Bin said one Sunday morning as they made pancakes together in her apartment, flour somehow ending up everywhere despite their best efforts. Is that a complaint? Hannah asked, wiping a smudge of batter from his cheek. Not even slightly, he said, catching her hand and pressing a kiss to her palm. I didn't realize I wanted this normalcy, this simple joy, until you showed me what I was missing. But there were complications too, moments when Hannah caught glimpses of the life Woo Bin led outside their bubble. His phone would ring at odd hours, and he'd step into another room to take calls in rapid Korean too fast for her to follow. He'd disappear for a day or two without much explanation, returning with shadows under his eyes and tension in his shoulders that only eased when she held him. Men in dark suits would occasionally appear at restaurants where they were eating, nodding respectfully at Wu Bin before melting back into the crowd. Who are they? Hannah asked after one such incident at a barbecue restaurant in Gangnam. Business associates, Wu Bin said, which was technically an answer but explained nothing. What kind of business requires associates who look like they could bench press a car? He'd smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. The kind that requires security. I've made enemies over the years, Hannah. People who would love to find something or someone they could use against me. That's why I'm careful about being seen with you in public. It's not because I'm ashamed. I could never be ashamed of you. It's because I'm protecting you. From what exactly? Hannah had pressed. Wu Bin had looked at her for a long moment, something like pain flickering across his features. From complications that you don't need in your life. Please, Hannah, trust me on this. There are parts of my world that I'm not ready to share yet, but I will. When the time is right, I'll tell you everything. I promise. And because she loved him, and yes, she'd admitted to herself that she loved him, even if she hadn't said it out loud yet, she'd let it go. But the questions lingered, accumulating like clouds before a storm. The storm broke on a cold February evening. Wu Bin had been away for almost a week on what he'd vaguely described as business in Busan, and Hannah had been looking forward to his return. He'd texted that morning saying he'd be back that evening and wanted to take her somewhere special. She'd spent an embarrassing amount of time getting ready, finally settling on a deep blue dress that Wu Bin had once said made her eyes look like they held secrets. She was just applying the last of her lipstick when her doorbell rang. Assuming Wu Bin was early, she grabbed her coat and purse and flung open the door with a smile that immediately froze on her face. Jason stood in her hallway, looking disheveled and desperate in a way she'd never seen before. His usually perfectly styled hair was messy, his eyes were bloodshot, and his expensive suit was wrinkled like he'd been wearing it for days. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. "No, we really don't," Hannah replied, moving to close the door. Jason's hand shot out, stopping it. "Please, Hannah, 5 minutes. I'm begging you." There was something in his voice, genuine fear, maybe, that made Hannah pause against her better judgment. "Fine, 5 minutes. Out here in the hallway. Then you leave and don't come back." Jason nodded, running a hand through his hair. "I need to warn you about my uncle. About Wu Bin. You're in danger, Hannah." Hannah's blood went cold. "What are you talking about?" "He's not who you think he is," Jason said, his words tumbling out rapidly. "I should have told you sooner, but I was angry and petty and I thought, God, I don't know what I thought. But Wu Bin isn't just some businessman. He's involved in things, dangerous things. He runs." Jason paused, seeming to struggle with the words. "He runs an organization, a criminal organization." "That's ridiculous," Hannah said, but even as she said it, pieces were clicking into place in her mind with sickening clarity. The mysterious business trips, the security detail, the way people looked at Wu Bin with a mixture of respect and fear, the careful privacy, the reluctance to be photographed together. "It's not ridiculous, it's the truth," Jason insisted. "The Kim family has been involved in organized crime for generations. My mother left that world when she married my father, tried to give me a normal life away from all of it. But Wu Bin, he's the head of it all now. And I know you think I'm just a bitter ex trying to sabotage your new relationship. But Hannah, I'm serious. You need to get away from him before you get hurt." Hannah's mind was reeling, but she forced herself to focus. "If this is true, why are you telling me now? You've known about my relationship with Wu Bin for months." Jason had the grace to look ashamed. "Because Victoria left me. The investment fell through, and she dropped me like I was nothing, and I realized what an idiot I'd been. I realized I destroyed the best thing in my life for money that I didn't even get. And I saw you with Wu Bin, saw how he looked at you, and I was jealous and angry, and I thought," he laughed bitterly, "I thought you were getting your revenge by dating my uncle, and I was too proud to interfere. But then I heard things, rumors about Wu Bin consolidating power, eliminating rivals, and I got scared. For you. Despite everything, I don't want you to get hurt." Before Hannah could respond, she heard footsteps on the stairs. Wu Bin appeared, taking in the scene with dark, unreadable eyes. He was dressed impeccably as always, but there was something different about him tonight. A hardness, a dangerous edge that Hannah had never seen before. "Jason," he said quietly, "I believe Hannah asked you to leave. I'm not leaving until she knows the truth, Jason said, but he took an unconscious step backward, away from his uncle. And what truth is that? Wu Bin's voice was ice. That you're a coward who's trying to ease his guilty conscience by interfering in someone else's happiness? That you're so self-centered you think ruining Hannah's peace of mind counts as protecting her? Tell her, Jason demanded. Tell her what you really do. Tell her about the Kim family business. Tell her why you always have armed guards and why you disappear for days at a time to handle problems. Tell her the truth, uncle, or I will. The silence that followed felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing the ground was about to give way. Hannah looked at Wu Bin, searching his face for denial, for the reassurance that Jason was lying or exaggerating. But what she saw instead was resignation and something that looked like grief. Hannah, Wu Bin said softly, let's go inside. You deserve to hear this properly, not in a hallway where your neighbors can listen. That's when Hannah knew. Jason wasn't lying. The man she'd fallen in love with, the man who'd held her while she cried and made her laugh, and showed her what it felt like to be truly cherished, was someone else entirely. Or maybe he was both people simultaneously, and she was about to find out just how complicated the truth could be. She turned without a word and walked back into her apartment, leaving the door open behind her. Both men followed her inside, Jason hovering near the entrance like he wasn't sure he was welcome, Wu Bin moving to stand near the windows, backlit by the Seoul skyline. Hannah sat down on her couch, folding her hands in her lap to stop them from shaking. Okay, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. Tell me, all of it, the truth. Wu Bin looked at her with such tenderness that it hurt. Where do you want me to start? Start with whether Jason is right. Are you involved in organized crime? Yes. The word hung in the air between them, simple and devastating. Hannah felt like she'd been punched in the stomach, even though she'd known, on some level, what the answer would be. Hearing him confirm it was different from suspecting it. What does that mean exactly? What do you do? Wu Bin took a breath. The Kim family has been involved in what you might call organized crime for 4 generations. We started as a mutual aid society for Koreans in difficult circumstances, which evolved into something more complex. Now we're involved in various enterprises, some legal, some in gray areas, some explicitly illegal. I took over leadership from my father 8 years ago. What kind of legal? Hannah demanded. Money laundering. Loan sharking with interest rates that exceed legal limits. Protection services that aren't always voluntary. Gambling operations. Import-export of goods that don't always go through official customs channels. He held her gaze steadily, not flinching from her reaction. I won't insult you by pretending we're heroes or that we only hurt bad people. We're a criminal organization. Hannah, I'm a criminal. That's the truth. Jason made a sound of vindication from the doorway. See? I told you. Shut up, Jason, Hannah and Wu Bin said simultaneously. Hannah stood up, pacing the length of her living room because sitting still was impossible. Her mind was racing, trying to reconcile the gentleman who brought her tea when she was stressed with the crime boss standing in her apartment. Have you killed people? She asked abruptly. Wu Bin's expression didn't change. I've made decisions that resulted in people dying. I've given orders that ended lives. I haven't personally pulled a trigger or held a knife, if that's what you're asking, but I'm responsible for deaths nonetheless. The casual way he said it, the complete lack of deflection or justification, somehow made it worse and better simultaneously. At least he wasn't lying or trying to minimize his role. When were you going to tell me? Hannah asked, stopping her pacing to face him. Or were you just going to keep me in the dark forever? Let me build a life with someone I didn't really know. I was going to tell you, Wu Bin said. Soon. I was waiting for the right time, which I realize sounds like an excuse, but it's true. I've been trying to figure out how to explain my world to you without losing you, because Hannah, his voice cracked slightly. Losing you would destroy me. You should have told me before we started this, Hannah said, her own voice breaking. You should have given me the choice, the informed choice, about whether I wanted to be involved with someone like you. You're right. I should have. I was selfish and cowardly, and I justified it by telling myself I was protecting you from information that could put you in danger. But really, I was protecting myself from the possibility that you'd walk away. He took a step toward her, then stopped when she held up a hand. I love you, Hannah. I know I have no right to say that now, after lying by omission, but it's true. I love you more than I've loved anyone. And if my world is too dark for you to be part of, I'll accept that. But please know that everything between us, every moment, every feeling, that was real. Hannah felt tears streaming down her face, hot and angry and confused. I don't know what to do with this, she admitted. I don't know how to process that the man I love is also someone who's done terrible things. I don't know if I can. The sound of shattering glass interrupted her as the window exploded inward in a shower of crystalline shards. Everything happened in rapid succession, too fast for Hannah's brain to fully process. Woo Bin was suddenly there, his body covering hers as he tackled her to the floor behind the couch. More glass shattered. Someone was shouting in Korean. Jason screamed. Then came the unmistakable crack of gunfire, sharp and terrifyingly loud in the enclosed space. Hannah's ears were ringing, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribcage. Woo Bin's weight pressed her into the floor, protective and solid. She could feel his heart beating against her back, could hear him speaking rapidly into a phone in Korean too fast for her to follow. Stay down, he said in English, his mouth close to her ear. Don't move, don't look up. I need you to trust me right now, Hannah. More gunfire erupted from somewhere outside the apartment. Hannah heard running footsteps in the hallway, shouting, chaos. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening in her apartment, in her safe space, in her life that up until 3 minutes ago had been complicated but manageable. Jason was curled up by the door, his hands over his head, making sounds that were half sobs, half prayers. Part of Hannah's brain registered that he appeared unharmed, which was something. The rest of her brain was trying very hard not to completely shut down from terror. How many? Woo Bin barked into his phone, still in Korean. A pause. Good. Secure the perimeter and find out who sent them. I want answers within the hour. He ended the call and shifted slightly, still keeping Hannah covered. Are you hurt? Did any glass hit you? I don't know, Hannah stammered. She couldn't feel anything beyond the adrenaline coursing through her system and the surreal disconnect of being an action movie, except this was her actual life. Woo Bin carefully moved off her, keeping low, and did a quick visual assessment. His hands were gentle as they checked her arms, her neck, looking for injuries. You're okay, he said, and Hannah realized he was trying to convince himself as much as her. You're going to be fine. The gunfire had stopped. The apartment was eerily quiet except for the sound of Jason's panicked breathing and the distant wail of sirens getting closer. Woo Bin pulled out his phone again and made another call. We need cleanup at this location. Police will be here in approximately 4 minutes. Standard protocol. He listened for a moment, his jaw tightening. No, she wasn't hit. But this can't happen again. Find a leak and handle it. Woo Bin, Hannah said, her voice shaking. What the hell just happened? Before he could answer, men in dark suits appeared in her doorway. The same kind of men she'd seen following Woo Bin discreetly over the past months. They entered the apartment with practiced efficiency, one of them immediately moving to check the broken window while others secured the hallway. Sir, one of them said in accented English, probably for Hannah's benefit. The attackers fled when we returned fire. 2 vehicles heading south toward Gangnam. We have people following. Good, Woo Bin said, standing and helping Hannah to her feet. Glass crunched under their shoes. Get Jason out of here and make sure he gets home safely. And someone call my attorney. The police will have questions. I'm not leaving, Jason said from his position by the door, his voice high and panicked. Those people just tried to kill us. You think I'm just going to go home and pretend this is normal? Those people weren't trying to kill you. Nephew, Woo Bin said coldly. You were collateral damage at worst. This was about me, and by extension, Hannah, which is exactly why you're leaving. Your presence here complicates things. 2 of the suited men moved toward Jason, who scrambled to his feet. Hannah, come with me, he pleaded. Please, get away from this insanity while you still can. Hannah looked at Jason, her ex-fiancé who traded her for money and was now trying to play hero, and then at Woo Bin, who was watching her with an expression that managed to be both guarded and desperately hopeful. She was terrified, furious, confused, and somehow still in love despite everything. Her life had just turned into an action thriller. Her apartment looked like a war zone, and she needed to make a decision about what happened next. Go, Jason, she said quietly. Just go. Hannah, I said go. The force in her voice surprised even her. You don't get to pretend you care about my safety now. You gave up that right when you sold me out for an investment deal. Whatever happens next, it's my choice. My life, not yours. Jason looked like he wanted to argue, but the men were already escorting him toward the door. He cast one last desperate look at Hannah before disappearing into the hallway. The moment he was gone, Hannah's knees gave out. Wu Bin caught her, guided her to sit on the couch, miraculously undamaged despite the chaos. Breathe, he said softly. Just breathe. You're safe now. Safe. Hannah laughed, a sound bordering on hysteria. People just shot at my apartment. At me. How is any of this safe? It's not, Wu Bin admitted. And I'm so sorry, Hannah. This is exactly what I was trying to prevent. Someone found out about you, about us, and they tried to use you to get to me. The sirens were very close now, probably pulling up outside the building. One of Wu Bin's men appeared with a blanket, draping it around Hannah's shoulders. Another was already on the phone, presumably with the attorney Wu Bin had mentioned. The police are going to ask questions, Wu Bin said, crouching in front of Hannah, so they were at eye level. I need you to tell them the truth, that you don't know why someone would target your apartment, that you don't know who the attackers were. My people will handle the rest. You want me to lie to the police? Hannah asked. I want you to stay safe and uninvolved in an investigation that could put you in more danger, Wu Bin corrected. Please, Hannah. I know I'm asking a lot after what you just learned about me, but I need you to trust me a little longer. There was pounding on the door. The police had arrived. Wu Bin's men moved with choreographed precision, adopting positions and expressions that suddenly made them look like concerned bystanders rather than trained security. It was impressive and disturbing how quickly they transformed. The next 2 hours were a blur of police questions, forensic teams photographing bullet holes and collecting glass fragments, and neighbors clustering in the hallway to gossip about the excitement. Hannah answered questions on autopilot, her mind still trying to process everything that had happened. Wu Bin stayed close, playing the role of concerned boyfriend perfectly, answering questions about where he'd been and why he'd been visiting Hannah's apartment. The police seemed suspicious. This kind of violence was rare in this neighborhood, but without evidence connecting Wu Bin to anything illegal, they had no reason to detain him. Eventually, they left with promises to follow up and suggestions that Hannah might want to stay somewhere else for a few days while they investigated. When the apartment finally emptied of everyone except Wu Bin and one of his security team, Hannah felt the full weight of the evening crash down on her. She started laughing, then crying, then laughing again, her emotions swinging wildly as the adrenaline wore off and shock set in. I can't stay here tonight, she said. Looking at the boarded-up window, the glass still scattered across her floor despite the police's collection efforts. This place doesn't feel safe anymore. Stay with me, Wu Bin said immediately. My penthouse has security that would make a bank vault jealous. You'll be safe there. Will I? Hannah asked, looking at him directly. Will I really be safe anywhere in your world? Or is this going to be my life now? Looking over my shoulder, wondering when the next attack will come, lying to police about why people are trying to kill me. Wu Bin's expression crumbled slightly. I'll understand if you want to walk away. After tonight, after everything you've learned, I won't blame you for choosing a normal life with someone who can give you safety and stability. But Hannah, if you stay, I swear I will do everything in my power to protect you. I'll assign you permanent security. I'll teach you how to defend yourself. I'll move mountains to ensure you're never in danger again. That's not a real solution, though, is it? Hannah said, exhausted and overwhelmed. You can't protect me from your world while keeping me in it. That's not how this works. Then I'll leave it, Wu Bin said, the words tumbling out in a rush. I'll step down from the organization, transfer power to someone else, walk away from everything. I've been looking for an exit strategy anyway, a way to transition out without starting a war. This could be the push I needed. Hannah stared at him. You'd really do that? Give up everything for me? In a heartbeat, Wu Bin said, and the conviction in his voice was unmistakable. Hannah, I spent 20 years building an empire I never really wanted, following a path my father set for me before I was old enough to choose for myself. The only thing in my life that's felt real, that's felt like mine, is you. If walking away from the organization means I get to keep you, then it's not even a difficult choice. And here's where I need you all watching to drop a comment and let me know, Should Hannah stay with Wu Bin or should she run? Because what she decides next is going to change everything. Don't forget to hit subscribe because this story is about to get even more intense. Hannah looked around her destroyed apartment, at the evidence of violence that had invaded her sanctuary, at the man who'd lied to her but was now offering to upend his entire life for her. She thought about Jason, who'd chosen money over love and ended up with neither. She thought about her own journey, coming to Korea, building a career, surviving betrayal, finding unexpected love in the last place she'd thought to look. "I need time," she said finally. "I need to think about all of this without people shooting at me, or police asking questions, or you looking at me like I'm the only thing keeping you from falling apart." Wu Bin nodded, though she could see how much it cost him. "Of course. Take all the time you need. But please, let me keep you safe while you're deciding. Stay at the penthouse. Let my security watch over you. You don't have to talk to me, don't have to make any decisions. Just let me know you're protected." It was a reasonable request, all things considered. Hannah gathered some clothes and essentials, avoided looking at the broken window and bullet-scarred walls, and let Wu Bin's team transport her to his penthouse in Hanamdal. The building's security was indeed impressive. Armed guards, biometric scanners, cameras covering every angle. It felt less like an apartment building and more like a fortress. And listen, if you're not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? We have so many more incredible Afro-Korean stories coming your way. Stories about love, power, culture, and people who refuse to be anything less than extraordinary. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. The penthouse itself was exactly as she remembered. Beautiful, expensive, impersonal. Wu Bin showed her to a guest room that was probably bigger than her entire destroyed apartment, told her to make herself at home, and then, true to his word, gave her space. She could hear him in another part of the penthouse, speaking in rapid Korean on the phone, presumably dealing with the fallout from the attack. Hannah took a long shower, washing away the glass dust and terror and exhaustion. She stood under the hot water and let herself fall apart properly, crying out all the fear and confusion and anger that she'd been holding in. When she finally emerged, wrapped in one of Wu Bin's absurdly luxurious robes, she felt wrung out but clearer. She found him on the balcony, standing at the railing and looking out over Seoul's glittering skyline. He'd changed into casual clothes, dark jeans and a simple black shirt, and without the expensive suits, he looked younger, more vulnerable. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked as she joined him, not looking away from the view. "Couldn't stop thinking," Hannah replied. "The night air was cold, but not unbearable." "Did you find out who attacked us?" "A rival organization trying to send a message. They've been dealt with." The casual way he said it sent a shiver down Hannah's spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. "Dealt with how? Do you really want to know?" Wu Bin asked, finally turning to look at her. Hannah thought about it. "No," she admitted, "but I need to know anyway. If I'm going to make an informed decision about this, about us, I need to understand what I'm accepting." Wu Bin was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "Fair enough. We identified the people who ordered the attack and made it clear that targeting you was unacceptable. 3 people are dead. 5 are in hospital. The organization that employed them is no longer operational. We absorbed their remaining assets and personnel. It's not pretty, Hannah, and I won't pretend it is. But in my world, you respond to violence with overwhelming force or you appear weak. And appearing weak gets more people killed." The rational, law-abiding part of Hannah's brain was screaming that this was wrong, that she should be horrified, that she should run as far and fast as possible. But another part, the part that had been violated when someone shot at her home, the part that understood Wu Bin was describing protection, not senseless violence, felt a grim satisfaction. "I'm not a good person," she said quietly, "because hearing that they're dead makes me feel safer." "What does that say about me?" "It says you're human," Wu Bin replied. "It says you're processing trauma in a way that makes sense given the circumstances. Don't confuse self-preservation with moral failure." They stood in silence for a while, watching the city breathe and pulse below them. Finally, Hannah spoke. "Tell me about your life. Your real life. I want to know what I'm signing up for if I stay." So Wu Bin told her about growing up as the youngest son in a family that ran a criminal empire, expected to be loyal but not important. About his older brother who was supposed to inherit everything, but died in a car accident that may or may not have been arranged by rivals. About stepping into leadership at 28 and discovering he was actually good at it, at strategy, at reading people, and making the hard choices that kept the organization running. He told her about the legitimate businesses they ran as front and profit centers, about the illegal operations that funded everything else, about the complex web of relationships with other organizations, with corrupt officials, with legitimate businesses that looked the other way as long as they got their cut, about the constant balancing act between maintaining power and avoiding too much attention from law enforcement. It's not glamorous, he said. It's mostly boring business meetings and managing personalities and dealing with petty disputes before they escalate into violence. But yes, people die. Rivals, traitors, sometimes innocents who are in the wrong place at the wrong time. I try to minimize casualties, try to be strategic rather than brutal, but at the end of the day, I'm responsible for all of it. And you want to leave this? Hannah asked. I've wanted to leave for years, Wu Bin admitted. But leaving isn't simple. You can't just quit an organization like this. People who try to walk away either end up dead or pulled back in. I've been slowly setting up a transition, grooming a successor, positioning things so that when I step down, it doesn't create a power vacuum that triggers a war. It's delicate work, and it takes time. How much time? 6 months, maybe less if I push it. I have a plan for legitimate business ventures that can sustain me financially. I have loyalists who'll make sure no one tries to eliminate me as a threat. I have contingencies and backup plans and exit strategies. What I didn't have until recently was a reason to execute any of them. You gave me that reason, Hannah. Hannah processed this, tried to imagine Wu Bin in a normal life, free from the organization. What would you do if you left? He smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his face. I've always wanted to run a restaurant, somewhere small and intimate, the kind of place where people come for the food and the atmosphere, not because it's trendy. Maybe a traditional Korean place that serves food the way my grandmother used to make it. Stupid dream for someone like me, I know, but there it is. The image of powerful, dangerous Kim Wu Bin running a cozy restaurant was so incongruous that Hannah laughed. That's actually adorable. Don't tell anyone, Wu Bin said with mock seriousness. I have a reputation to maintain. They smiled at each other, and for a moment, it felt like before, like they were just Hannah and Wu Bin, two people falling in love, uncomplicated and simple. But the moment passed, and reality reasserted itself. I need to know, Hannah said, if I stay, if we do this, are you expecting me to be okay with the illegal stuff? To participate or look the other way, or become some kind of mafia wife who pretends not to know what her husband does? No, Wu Bin said firmly. I would never ask you to compromise your values. If you stay, it would be with full knowledge of what I do, but no expectation that you participate or approve. You could keep your job, your life, your identity completely separate from the organization. I just ask that you be discreet about what you know and accept the security measures I need to put in place. And if someone uses me against you again, then I respond the way I did today, and we increase security measures. Hannah, I won't lie to you. Being with me comes with risks. But I promise you, I will do everything in my power to minimize those risks and keep you safe. And if you want me to accelerate my exit from the organization, I'll do it. We'll figure it out together. Hannah looked at him, really looked at him. This man who was simultaneously a crime boss and someone who dreamed of running a restaurant, who'd killed people and also remembered how she took her tea, who'd lied to her about his identity but was offering her total honesty now, who'd upended her entire understanding of morality and safety and love. I should walk away, she said. That's what any rational person would do. Cut my losses, start over somewhere safe and boring and legal. Yes, Wu Bin agreed. That's absolutely what you should do. But I don't want to, Hannah continued, because despite everything, despite the danger and the lies and the criminal empire and the people who just try to kill me, I love you. And I've spent my whole life being rational and safe and making the smart choice. And where did it get me? Engaged to a man who traded me for money. So maybe it's time I make the completely irrational, probably stupid, definitely dangerous choice for once. Wu Bin's expression shifted through surprise, hope, and something that looked like reverence. Hannah, I'm staying, she said, the words feeling both terrifying and liberating. I'm staying, but on my terms. You accelerate your exit plan. You teach me everything I need to know to stay safe in your world. You never lie to me again, even if you think the truth will hurt me. And you let me keep my life, my job, my identity. I'm not becoming some kept woman who exists only in relation to you. Deal. Deal, Wu Bin said immediately, then pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was the most precious thing in the world. Thank you, he whispered into her hair. Thank you for taking this chance on me. I promise I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret it. Hannah held him back, breathing in his familiar scent, feeling his heartbeat against her cheek. She was terrified and exhilarated and completely uncertain about what came next. But for the first time since Jason's betrayal, she felt like she was choosing her own path, making her own decisions, claiming her own future. So, she said, pulling back to look at him, if we're doing this, we're doing it right. No more sneaking around, no more hiding. I want to meet your people, understand your organization, know exactly what I'm part of. And I want to be involved in the exit planning. My future's tied up in this now, so I get a say in how it happens. Wu Bin smiled, that rare full smile that made him look years younger. Absolutely. Though I should warn you, some of my lieutenants are going to be deeply confused by the idea of me asking a woman for input on organizational decisions. We're a bit old-fashioned in some ways. Then it's time for some modernization, Hannah said with a grin. Consider it my contribution to the Kim family criminal empire, dragging you all into the 21st century. Over the next few months, Hannah's life transformed in ways she could never have imagined. Wu Bin kept his promise about honesty, introducing her to key members of his organization and explaining the complex power dynamics that governed his world. She met his lieutenants, hard men with harder reputations who regarded her with suspicion until Wu Bin made it clear that disrespecting Hannah was equivalent to disrespecting him. She attended meetings where they discussed business strategies that ranged from legitimate to questionable to definitely illegal. She learned about the organization's structure, its rivals, its allies, its history. She discovered that Wu Bin had been working on his exit plan for longer than he'd admitted, carefully positioning people and resources to ensure a smooth transition. True to his word, he also ensured her safety. Hannah got a security detail that followed her discreetly but constantly. She learned self-defense from an ex-military instructor who taught her how to identify threats, escape dangerous situations, and fight back if necessary. Her apartment was repaired and fortified with security measures that would make most government buildings jealous. But she also kept her job, maintained her friendships, lived her life as normally as possible under the circumstances. Mina thought the whole situation was simultaneously terrifying and romantic, like living in a K-drama where the stakes were deadly real. Hannah's mother remained blissfully unaware, believing Hannah was dating a successful businessman, which was technically true, just incomplete. The proposal came on a rainy evening in late spring. They were in Wu Bin's penthouse, cooking dinner together, a ritual they'd adopted when both their schedules allowed. Wu Bin had been teaching Hannah to make traditional Korean dishes, patiently correcting her technique while she teased him about his perfectionism. I have something to ask you, Wu Bin said as they sat down to eat the bibimbap they prepared together. If it's about whether I remembered to add the sesame oil? Yes, I did, Hannah replied, mixing her rice and vegetables. It's not about the sesame oil. He reached across the table, taking her hand. Hannah, I know our relationship hasn't followed any conventional path. I know I've brought danger and complication into your life. But you've also brought joy and purpose and hope for a future I never thought I could have. So I'm asking, will you marry me? He pulled out a ring box, opening it to reveal a stunning diamond that caught the light and scattered it in rainbow fragments. It was beautiful, tasteful, exactly Hannah's style. Hannah stared at the ring, then at Wu Bin, then back at the ring. Are you serious? You're proposing while we're eating bibimbap in sweatpants. I'm absolutely serious, Wu Bin said, and despite the casual setting, his expression was solemn. I know it's not the romantic proposal you probably imagined. No fancy restaurant, no sunset, no photographers hiding in the bushes. But this is us, Hannah, real and messy and imperfect. And I want to spend the rest of my life exactly like this. Eating dinner with you, teaching you to cook, laughing at terrible jokes, building something honest and true. Hannah felt tears pricking her eyes. This man, this complicated, dangerous, surprisingly sweet man, had somehow become her entire world. "Yes," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I'll marry you. Though for the record, I actually prefer the sweatpants proposal. It's more authentic." Wu Bin slipped the ring on her finger, then came around the table to kiss her properly, deep and sweet and full of promises. "I love you," he murmured against her lips. "More than I knew it was possible to love someone." "I love you too," Hannah replied. "Even though you're a criminal mastermind who's terrible at delegating and has an unhealthy obsession with kitchen organization." He laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "I'll work on the delegating. The kitchen organization stays." If you're still here watching this story unfold, you're the real MVP. This is getting intense, right? Drop a comment telling me what you think her plan is, and don't forget to subscribe because you do not want to miss how this ends. They got married 3 months later in a small, private ceremony at a traditional hanok in Buckshin. Only close friends and family attended. Mina as Hannah's maid of honor, several of Wu Bin's most trusted lieutenants, and carefully selected family members who could be trusted to keep the event low-key. Jason wasn't invited, obviously, though Hannah heard through the grapevine that he'd started dating someone new and was apparently much less enthusiastic about putting business before relationships. Hannah wore a custom-made hanbok in deep blue and crimson, a fusion of Korean tradition and her own style. Wu Bin wore traditional clothes as well, looking both powerful and vulnerable as he watched her walk toward him. When they exchanged vows, Hannah promised to love him through both his darkness and his light, while Wu Bin promised to protect her heart as fiercely as he protected her life. The wedding reception was surprisingly fun, despite Hannah's initial concerns about celebrating with a room full of criminals. Wu Bin's people turned out to be excellent party guests when they relaxed, telling outrageous stories and making toasts that range from heartfelt to hilariously inappropriate. Mina got slightly drunk and gave a speech about how Hannah had gone from being traded like a baseball card to marrying a literal mafia boss. And wasn't that just the best revenge story ever? As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Wu Bin pulled Hannah onto the dance floor for one last dance. They swayed together under paper lanterns that cast soft light across the courtyard, and Hannah felt a contentment she'd never experienced before. "Happy?" Wu Bin asked, his arms secure around her waist. Terrifyingly so, Hannah admitted. "I keep waiting for something to go wrong, for this to be too good to be true." "It's not," Wu Bin assured her. "This is real. We're real. And in 2 months, when I officially step down from the organization, we get to start building whatever life we want. Restaurant, travel, maybe even a dog if you want one." "A dog?" Hannah laughed. "You Mr. Perfectly Organized Penthouse want a dog?" "I want a life," Wu Bin corrected. "A real one, with mess and chaos and joy in you. If that includes a dog, I'm willing to adapt." 6 months later, Wu Bin kept his promise. He orchestrated a careful transition of power that positioned his most trusted lieutenant as the new leader while ensuring his own safety. There were tense moments, negotiations that went late into the night, and one incident where a rival organization tried to take advantage of the perceived weakness, but Wu Bin handled it all with the strategic brilliance that had made him successful in the first place. When he walked away from his final organizational meeting, Hannah was waiting for him outside. They drove together to a small restaurant space in Itaewon that Wu Bin had purchased, the beginning of his dream of running a place that served traditional Korean food with love and care. "This is it," he said, standing in the empty space that smelled of fresh paint and possibility. "The start of our new life. What do you think?" Hannah looked around the space, already imagining tables and chairs, kitchen sounds, and customer laughter. "I think it's perfect," she said. "I think we're going to build something amazing here." And they did. Over the next year, Wu Bin's restaurant became a beloved neighborhood spot, the kind of place where regulars knew each other by name and the food was consistently excellent. Hannah continued her work in the tech industry, balancing her career with helping Wu Bin during busy service hours. They adopted a dog, a scruffy rescue who Wu Bin pretended to merely tolerate but actually adored. Life wasn't perfect. Wu Bin still had connections to his old world, still got calls sometimes about situations that required his insight, still carried the weight of decisions he'd made. But he was free in ways that mattered. building something with his own hands rather than managing an empire built on fear and violence. Hannah sometimes thought about how different her life could have been if Jason hadn't betrayed her, if she'd never reconnected with Wu Bin at that business reception, if she'd made the safe, rational choice to walk away when she learned the truth. But those alternate paths felt distant and unreal compared to the messy, complicated, beautiful reality she'd chosen. On their first anniversary, they sat on the balcony of the penthouse they still kept, looking out over Seoul's glittering skyline. "Do you ever regret it?" Hannah asked. "Leaving the organization, choosing this life?" Wu Bin pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Not for a single second. I traded power and fear for peace and love. That's the best deal I've ever made." Hannah smiled, thinking about how far they'd both come. "Jason tried to trade me for an investor and ended up with neither. You traded a criminal empire for me and got a restaurant, a dog, and apparently really excellent bibimbap making skills. Don't forget the most important thing I got," Wu Bin said, his voice warm with affection. "The dog," Hannah teased. "You," he corrected, laughing. "I got you. Everything else is just bonus."